Go ahead, John, whenever you want to start.
Okay, great.
Recording is started.
Thanks, Dale. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to our ESA of Ohio's virtual presentation today on cybersecurity, which is the threat intelligence and detection and response. So I'm John Smythe. I think most of the people know me on the call. We got a company up here in Toledo, Ohio, Habitat Security, with offices in Columbus and Michigan. I'm also on the board of the ESA of Ohio. And as most of you know, the ESA in the last few years is kind of in a rebuilding period, and now we've spun off from national. So we think we bring a really unique value proposition of being the regionally focused organization, the voice for the security industry in Ohio. And our intent is to bring value to our members, on a monthly, quarterly, and basis. So today's presentation is part of that. Our intent was to start doing regional meetings, which we got off to a start a year ago, and we're doing those. But obviously, COVID hit, and we had our first virtual a few months back about getting your business relaunched under the COVID situation. And if everyone can mute, by the way, I think there's a little background noise. Maybe Dale can look at that. But so in addition, there's been some emails going out. Make sure you take advantage of the training offering through our organization, as well as the savings programs that we do offer, and as well as really just being the voice of Ohio, the stuff we're doing behind the scenes for our industry. Real quick reminder, on October 29th at 2 p.m., we're doing our Ohio annual meeting virtually. We've got Stan Martin from CX, an organization that is out there working with police organizations in regards to alarm response, which is a major issue in the industry. And we've also got Jason Knott, who's the chief content officer for CE Pro and Security magazine, to give you some insights to the industry, how the trends and things that are going on. So anyway, we're going to continue to address our main mission of being the organized voice for our industry in Ohio, and offer things like we do today. So a few months back, one of our board members, Chip Shiver, out of Dayton, Cincinnati region, mentioned that there had been a spike, at least with some of his friends in the industry, and some ransomware attacks. And I'm sure most everyone on the call, to some level, has had an incident within their business, whether it was big or small. And Habitat for years was outsourcing most of their IT. I'm sorry, not outsourcing. We were doing it internally. And it was just moving too fast for us to be good. Our IT people just admitted that it was just getting past us, and we're a pretty large organization, but we just still felt we just couldn't handle it. So we decided to outsource it to a group we worked with for years in more of a break and fix solution, Affinity Group out of Toledo. They're a managed service provider, and they offer a diverse services within our region, and really have an intimate knowledge of the needs for monitoring electronic security industry, being working with us for I think nearly 20 years. Rick Tetro is the president of Affinity Group, and he's the person responsible for finding us today's expert speaker, Wes Spencer, who is the Chief Information Security Officer for Perch Security. We're also a customer of Affinity and Perch through Affinity Group. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick to give you a quick overview of the current landscape of cybersecurity, a little bit about his company, and then introduce our speaker today, Wes. So Rick.
Good morning. Thanks, John. My name is Rick Tetro, president and founder of Affinity IT Group. I'd like to thank you for bringing us into this important topic, IT security. I'd like to say a few words about Affinity. We started back in 1998 and located in Northwest Ohio, like John said, Toledo specifically. And we've got clients from the Carolinas, California. We're a technology service provider. Our services include managed IT services, managed security services. We have a data center and provide hosting services. In addition, we're a Microsoft solutions provider and assist clients with O365 and Azure cloud services. Okay. Our security services include security assessments, SIEM, log management, endpoint, DarkWeb monitoring, incident response, network monitoring, etc. Okay. There was once a time when if you wanted to steal something, and you guys are going to be aware of this, because this is what you do, You needed physical presence at the location of the item or items you wanted to steal. If you'd plan on how to get around the alarm system, the motion detectors, glass break detectors, etc., to get what you're after. Now, from the comfort of a hacker's living room or the junior high, as it was talked about earlier, hackers can infiltrate your business without ever stepping foot into physical space. Okay. Inc. magazine reported that companies lose $400 billion each year to hacking. It's 400 with a B. It's a lot of incentive for individuals, groups, and in some cases even countries to get involved with this new form of business. Everyone present in this meeting and all of our customers and your customers are potential customers to XYZ Hackers Inc. Okay. So what do we do about this? Every business owner should be improving their security posture against these cyber attacks. There's many ways to achieve this, and we could spend multiple days going over strategies, but I believe one, if not the most important improvements, is to monitor your network. You do this with a combination of software and people. And we have one of Affinity's partners in security that specialize in just that. These guys are the best at what they do, and I'd like to introduce Wes Spencer, Chief Information Security Officer of Perch Security. Wes?
There we go. I had the mute button on, as I think all webinars will do. Rick, thank you. I appreciate the introduction. Hey, before some of you joined, we were all just chatting it up and having a really good time just talking back and forth. And I'm going to take you guys up on that. What I really like to do is really enjoy the communication and collaboration and talking back and forth. So by all means, I want all of you to know, absolutely come off the mute button and give me some of your thoughts and feedback as we go through this, because my favorite discussions that I get to do like this are ones where we're just talking back and forth. I don't have all the answers. I will never promise to have all of the answers. You guys have the puzzle pieces as well that are critical to all of this. So that's my thought today, is I want to invite you to all of that as we discuss and chat through it. And as Rick said, I am with Perch Security, and you may not know much about Perch, and I'm actually not really here to talk about Perch, but I do think it helps for you to kind of know, who is this company that Rick has chosen, and what all do they do? Is there any credibility there, right? So, what Perch is providing is, we were talking right before this whole thing started, for a lot of you that are in physical security, think of this as a corollary or an offshoot, if you will, to what's happening in the world of cybersecurity, just as Rick kind of discussed and described. And there's a lot of analogies here that carry forth, and a lot of similarities. So if you want to think about what Perch is doing as a company, is we're just providing that managed oversight, looking at what's going on from the cybersecurity perspective, both inside organizations and outside, to provide the managed security. So that's kind of what we do at a high level. And here's who I am. So again, my name is Wes, as I mentioned before. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer. So I'm not a sales guy. I have been a security practitioner all my life, and I absolutely love it. I've been in security since I've been a little kid, hacking away on computers, and I've been very fortunate as I've kind of grown up and cut my teeth, so to speak, in different areas, just to be able to message, to share, to communicate cybersecurity concepts. Because I'll tell you one thing I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about small and mid-sized organizations doing things that matter, that reduce the threat of these cybersecurity attacks, notably in today's day and age, ransomware, as we mentioned, right? I've personally helped many organizations that have gone through a ransomware event. And let me tell you, those experiences, if you've never been through them, are harrowing. If you have been through one and you're on this call before, you're probably nodding your head thinking, yes, that was a nightmare. The late nights, the worry, the mad customers, the mad employees, the worry of how do I handle a financial transaction to a bad guy? I mean, just there's nothing good about it. And I'm here to tell you there are things that we can do to reduce that threat. I think you guys know, to draw the corollary again to physical security, we can't ever prevent bad guys from being bad guys. I can't prevent a bad guy from walking up to my home or my physical location, my business, but there are things I can do to deter, to detect, to respond, and stop or eliminate that physical threat. And in the same way, cybersecurity, we can do the exact same thing. And so that's really what I want to talk about today. And before I kind of move on, let me pause and just ask a really open-ended question for those of you that are on the call today. And I want to take you up on my my offer to come off mute and chat with me. For you guys, how important is cybersecurity? Is this something that's extremely top of mind? Is this something that's in the top 5? Is this something that's kind of lower and it's growing importance for you? I just love some open feedback from those of you that are on the call, what your thoughts are around cybersecurity.
For me at Gilmore, it's a constant job, keeping up with training our employees not to fall for the scams, keeping an eye on everything I can, keeping, patches up to date, firewall up to date. It's a big part of what I do every day.
Yeah. Wow, that's really well said. And I love that you hit both the technical and the people side, because, we all know we're only as secure as our weakest links, right? And our people are typically where the threats begin. So that's very wise. And I think you're exactly right. You're summing up, I think, where most SMBs are at is, look, there's never an end to this. Firewalls, updates, malware, all these things that are happening on top of the people. It's really well said. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll say it's one of our top. It's on the very top of our list, and we try our best to do lots of things to try to prevent it. Constantly thinking about it, constantly revising networks, separating networks, employee training. We use a company that does test emails. Where they send out test emails to see how employees respond to them.
Yep.
So yeah, we're constant. It's just absolutely on the top of our list.
That's really good feedback. Thank you. And yes, again, very similar, right? It's an overwhelming endeavor for sure. Anyone else?
I'll say something. So we've always felt like catastrophic things that could really hurt the business, and having a fire at somebody's property that you monitor and something goes wrong, or but this has really moved up as one of the biggest liabilities internally, as well as we also are on other people. We also are using other customers' networks, and the concern about actually working with their network and potentially opening something up or screwing something up. So I think it's just become one of our top liabilities within the company, which you should always look at the liability side of things and make sure you're prepared and planned and spending the time and money necessary to make sure you're doing everything you can to prevent these issues.
John, I love what you said about liability. You're getting into something I'm a big fan of, which is cybersecurity itself is an extension of risk for the business, right? We're all business owners here. We all understand, if a cybersecurity risk is $15 and I make, $20,000 a day, probably not a risk I need to worry about. And yet, if cybersecurity has, and I'll show you some numbers in a minute, if it's a far higher risk, what we're really talking about is how do I mitigate and handle those risks in a scientific way, right? In a way that makes sense for our organization. I love that thought, John. You're exactly right. That is how we handle it. And I guess I have a follow-up question. Is anyone here, and it's okay if you say yes to this, because almost every time I do one of these webinars, people say yes to this. Does anyone here feel overwhelmed almost to the point there's not even any point in trying? Like you're always seeing breach after breach after breach, and you just want to throw your hands up and say, look, it's going to happen to us eventually. There's nothing I can do about it. Does anyone feel like that?
I'm not going to say overwhelmed. It is, not that you give up on it, but what I'm going to say is, as opposed to even your question before, this is a daily attack. And as the one gentleman even talked about, educating your employees, no matter how much you educate them, you're getting some kind of an email in there that looks real, may even be real until they get into it. And I'm one of the people where John said, starting to talk about getting overwhelmed. Been doing it for years, was virtually being able to keep us pretty well protected for years. But now these threats have stepped up, and how much better they are, that they're just so much more technically involved. So for me, give you an example, the other day, we had an attempted breach. It didn't get in, but the time it would take for me, and not just the time, we can be as protected as we want by software, and we go a long ways. We're one of your users, Perch, and it does a lot of things we need, but it's where that employee lets somebody in.
Yeah.
In my call, this is almost like a plug, not meant to be, but we had this happen the other day. There was attempted breach. I said, call Affinity, because I don't have the time to spend all day going through everybody's machine and making sure that they're completely safe, or had they gotten any inroads into our system. So yes, it's not, it is, you could say overwhelming, because it's overwhelming to what task we already have on the job. And that's why I need the expertise of like your guys' software and another company to help us. Because it's like one of the Net1 seminars I went to, they had the FBI there to do an open class. They said it's not if you get breached, it's when you get breached. So it is a constant battle.
Yep, that's really well said. I almost kind of wish I could have just captured. I guess this is recorded, right? That is a clip right there that's worth saving. I love the mentality and the outlook, right? You guys are fighting that battle. It's a daily battle. We must stay vigilant. This is not, I tell people all the time, cybersecurity is not a project. It's not something I begin and finish. It's a cyclical process that never ends. And so, when we understand and recognize it that way, and we build what we're doing around it, educating our users, constantly getting buy-in for it, choosing right technology partners like Affinity, like you mentioned. I love that you just said, right? Like, you guys know what you can do, your capabilities, and there are times you just say, have Affinity help. They're here for us. They're the best at what they do. Bring them in to help in this certain case. That's exactly right. We're all in this together. Cybersecurity is not a Lone Ranger endeavor. Perch cannot solve it all. You can't solve it all. I can't solve it all. Affinity can't solve it all. But we can be in this together, and we can work in this together. So, wow, these are really good. This is really good stuff. What I wanted to do for a few minutes is walk you through a little bit of a very quick history lane of how we got to where we've been. So I've had the luxury, I guess, in my career of kind of growing up and, like I said, cutting my teeth through the old days of cybersecurity when it was nothing other than like website defacement. And you guys have seen the movie Sneakers and Hackers and all those like 1980s and 1990s hacker movies. You guys know as well as I do. Cyber threats are no longer national, going after the nuclear codes or just defacing a website, and that's it. You guys know that financial motivation is behind everything we see today in cybersecurity. You know that, I know that. I want to talk about how we got there for a minute, because this will teach us a lot about where we're going as well, and where the world is going on top of all of this. And so this is my favorite analogy to show. If you have ever heard me speak in the pre-corona days, I was always on the road traveling, and I would almost never speak at a conference without this image right here. So if you look at this, what do you see here? You got a lighthouse of some kind. I've never been in the Northwest or Northeast where there's a lot of lighthouses. I've just never grown up around there. But I see a lighthouse, kind of a dark, brooding day. Maybe one if I'm sitting on the front porch watching this. I've got a cup of coffee. I'm enjoying the nice day, but I'm out of the weather. But you know what? Here's the problem. I don't have the full picture. And because I don't have the full picture, I didn't see what was about to happen. And I love this analogy. Now, you and I probably know this is not the first major wave from a huge storm that's hit this lighthouse before. It's been designed to stop and protect against this. But the image itself is so telling. Because my perspective was affected by not having full visibility, I didn't understand what was actually happening. And I think there is a huge correlation in the world of cybersecurity today where we lack the visibility and we lack the full knowledge of what's happening around us. And so, whether you want to use this analogy or like the bird or the ostrich or whatever that's head in the sand, we often don't know what's going around us. And that lack of perspective affects not just our visibility, but our ability to respond and be doing the right things. And let me kind of explain this in maybe in a different way. So one of the unfortunate things that I get to do when we bring on at Perch an organization who's had some kind of systemic attack and they're coming in, they're using Perch for the first time, we talk to them. And one of the things I'll hear often is they'll say, I had no idea. I see these things on the news, but I had no idea what was happening. Here I am getting up and going to sleep at night for the first few days that bad guys in the network, and I had no idea. Those are the things that are really, really tough. right? Those are the things that are disheartening. And this is a big problem that we have in cybersecurity today. And I want to kind of talk about what's happened. So, for many, many years, I've talked about what I call a cybercrime supply chain. Think about, how a car is made, right? Not just the assembly line of how that car is made from, the beginning to the end, but think about the supply chain before and the supply chain after, right? Before, where do the metals and the plastics and the engineering come from to go into the raw materials that make up that car? What about after the car is made, the process and supply chain after it for fuel and tires and mechanics and all of these things that are happening, right? There's an enormous supply chain inside of an automobile. Same thing in the world of cybersecurity today is that unfortunately there's a supply chain in the criminal underground. So what we've seen today is that you don't anymore see a bad guy that just writes malware and runs it. Today, you see a completely different economy in which bad guys are doing the things that they do best and outsourcing the rest, very much like the rest of us do. I don't know if anyone recognizes this here. I'm going to give you a quick tour down history lane. Does anyone here remember a hacking group called the Lizard Squad by any chance? This is going to harken back to like the early 2010s. So not hearing any, and it doesn't surprise me, no big deal. Sometimes I ask, because someone will say, I remember those guys, I've read about them in the news, whatever. There's a hacking group, mostly made up of younger kids, believe it or not, miscreants, not super skilled, but super dangerous. And they call themselves the Lizard Squad. And this is something, this is my own screenshot that I captured back in the days when I was a professor of security and was doing research around this. This is now shut down, but the Lizard Stressor was a very simple tool that they made available, that they monetized. And what it did was you gave them a certain amount of money in Bitcoin. And what you would do is say, hey, you paid for 10 seconds, 15 minutes, whatever the number is that you paid for access to our botnet. And then what they would do is what's called a distributed denial of service attack against whoever you choose, whatever IP address or domain name you choose. If you remember in the early days of 2010, when Visa was shut down for many, many hours, it was this right here. It was Lizard Squad. So somebody decided to pay a bunch of money to Lizard Squad, got access to their botnet, and had them shut down Visa for them for the low price of, now back in the day, 8 Bitcoin wasn't a big deal back then. Today, of course, we know what Bitcoin's worth now. But that's my point, is showing you don't have to have any skill. All you have to do is have some Bitcoin, pay these guys, and they'll do your nasty work for you. This was an early day of what was starting to happen in today's day and age. Another example, this is another screenshot I grabbed. This comes from one of it's now shut down, but this is called the Real Deal Marketplace. This is one of those underground markets where bad guys buy and sell services. So this is a bad guy that had access to a very significant Microsoft vulnerability. This was exploitable remotely. And he discovered this. He wrote the exploit behind it. And you know what he did with it? Rather than using it, he sold it. So this is probably some gray to black hat malware researcher discovered he found something very serious in a Microsoft flaw. And rather than reporting it to Microsoft, he said, you know what, I can make about $250,000 selling this. And that's what happened. So this bad guy sold it. I could show this to you in the Bitcoin blockchain where this was actually sold. So this is a good example, again, of there was a buyer and a seller back in, again, 2013 or so is when this guy happened, that had a market, and there was demand for this. And somebody paid 6 figures for access all the way back then, almost 10 years ago, for access to some very significant Microsoft vulnerabilities. Pretty serious. And this is the last one I'm going to show you. I don't want to have a huge history lesson. This is my favorite. So this guy right here is called Tox. And there's the staggering fact that I'm going to share with you after, but let me give you a story of what this guy was. This was the very first ransomware as a service. And this is my own screenshot. When I was a banker, I did some research around this and actually presented this at a very large banking conference. I had about 300 people come in. This is back when ransomware was first starting to trend upward. Ransomware was just starting to go after businesses in 2013. And so banks were very scared of this stuff. And here's what I did. I actually showed this to everybody. I had a virtual machine that I ran. I was showing on the projector screens up front in front of everybody. And I brought up this Tox website from the DarkWeb. and I built this out and I put in some of the details that I wanted. Like I want the ransomware to be this much money in Bitcoin. It's going to stay alive for 3 days. If I don't get paid, the rate's going to go up to whatever. And I went through this whole platform. I hit submit and it gave me my ransomware. I had a machine that was fully updated with fully updated antivirus patches, all that stuff. And I ran this guy and it ran the ransomware in front of everybody. And people's minds were just blown away. They couldn't believe that through just a couple clicks on a web forum, I had downloaded, operationalized, and used ransomware very simply that I could then deploy as much as I want with no knowledge whatsoever. And if you're wondering, like, why would a bad guy do this? Well, he takes a cut out of it, right? So this guy would be the escrow. So he would give you the ransomware with whatever metrics you want, and the payments would go through him. He would take a 20% cut and give you the rest. Pretty staggering stuff. Now, here's what's even more staggering. This right here was built by a high schooler. So this is a high schooler who's just interested, just curious, just wondered what he could do, extremely talented, built this thing, and it took off like wildfire. And in about 3 months, he shut it down because he realized what was happening and realized the full extent and shut it down. But it was too late because we now had proven an entire business model for bad guys of what we call ransomware as a service. And this is what we're struggling with today. When you guys see ransomware on the news today, the vast majority of it, that's those 6-figure to 7-figure ransoms, that's exactly what you see as an offshoot of that tox back in the early days of 2013 and 2014. And here's an example of this. Does anybody here remember the threat actors in 2018 called GandCrab by any chance? I don't know if anyone is familiar with those guys. I'm getting head shaking no, so no big deal. So this is why I wanted to show it. So GandCrab was, in 2018, the most significant threat actor in the world. These guys were nasty. They shut their operations down, as you can see, and this is my own screenshot I grabbed from when they posted this thing. I think it was around July is when they posted this team. So they were the talk of the town. This is the number one adversary we were all facing. They shut down, and look at this very bragging post that they made. I'm just going to read a couple points out of it to you. So they bragged $1 billion as a whole. They earned $150 million themselves, and their partner, call them, that helped them run the ransomware, got the rest. And this second paragraph you see right here, it says, "We're leaving for a well-deserved retirement. We've proven by doing evil deeds, retribution does not come. We've proved that in a year you can earn a lifetime," so on and so forth. That's terrible stuff. I don't know about, I hate reading that, right? They didn't get, they're still alive today. They've reformed a group and a new gang, but this is who we face today. This, and what we call at Perch, sort of this ransomware as a service, where you have those that develop the ransom that then give it to their affiliates who are responsible for getting it installed and running and attacking victims, and then they get a cut that gets passed back upward themselves. And why is this so effective? Well, it's effective. Developers are good at writing the ransomware. The affiliates are doing it. And so you have this supply chain of what's going on. Scary, right? Like I try not to be overly a security by like fear kind of person. But I do think it's important to do the reality check of who our adversary is, why we're facing them, right? But I know the normal outcome that most have is, then why try, right? How am I supposed to, as a small business in Ohio, how am I supposed to defend against that? How am I supposed to stop that stuff? That's a legitimate question that I think we all kind of have this thought. But I think what's more important for us is to recognize that you're a target, and I'm a target. Perch is a target. People go after us. People go after you. They're indiscriminate. They're going after. And so if you want to kind of actualize and data, here's some for you. So of Perches is a company very focused in the SMB sector, shows about $141,000 in financial ransomware from an SMB attack, right? So there's for you. And sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. Our end, we actually see that number skew a little higher into the 150,000s on average, but there you go as far as a number. And most of us aren't prepared to stop this stuff. We hope we are, and we do the best we can. As many said, it's not a lack of effort. It's not a lack of want. It's just simply we can't and often do enough, right? So let me get from you guys. Enough from me. I want to get some discussion going. Give me around this. What do you think has led to all of this? Or maybe more open-ended, what's your reaction to all of this? Like, you know, what's going on in your mind hearing and seeing all these things?
They're all trying to figure out how to unmute.
So maybe I can call icebreaker, huh? Let me go look at the attendee list. I know you guys have thoughts on this, right? Let's see. So John, you and I have been talking. You did the intro. John, give me your thoughts on this.
Well, I guess my short answer would be what happened to lead to this. I mean, the financial side of it, obviously, it became pretty economically beneficial for these people to do it, right? So, I mean, it's a little more versus just a hack and had some fun with it. They're actually monetarily benefiting from it. So
I will ask a question, and if it draws us too far off, then just let me know. But do you see, I mean, we've joked about it as we were starting the call. You've touched on it now a couple times during your presentation. You know, there's a recurring theme here of high school kids, younger adults, you know, middle-aged kids. Did this start out to some degree as an extension of, well, I'm tired with my Xbox, so is this the next step for them? And then all of a sudden they realized, well, wait a minute, I can make a buck on this. Is that part of this?
You know, what's interesting is in my view, you definitely see that are curious and doing some innovative things, like I box thing, but they're not, most of these kids that do these in and of themselves are not malicious. Like, they're not like, hey, I want to start an actual criminal gang. Where you see the carry out and the financial takeout is that's actual real mafia groups and real cybercrime gangs, and actually, believe it or not, state-sponsored malware that are operationalizing all of this stuff, right? And of course, we know this is all happening overseas. So one of our partners at Perch is an incident response firm, and one of his jobs when helping organizations that have had a significant cyber incident is he actually does the negotiations with these bad guys, bringing the price. They might ask for $1 million, and he's good enough to get it down to $200,000. And so he talks to these guys on a daily basis. He'll tell you, these people hate America. Usually Eastern Europe, they're Asian countries, not like us. They view us as enemies, and they view you and I as an extension of our government. And so these are groups that have no qualms, no issues, no sadness. They view us as rich as kings, and that they should be able to take some hard-earned money. They view it as what they're doing as a business. They really do. So it's really scary to think through the mindset of these guys, of how they think of who they are. And maybe, you know, this is another follow-up question. Does anyone here get frustrated? You feel like our government ought to do more? I mean, they protect us physically. Why do they not protect us as much in the cyber world?
Wes, I'll chime in there, more to the initial question you had than to the follow-up. I think what's led to the epidemic, part of it is the lack of investment in taking it seriously. As a third-party provider, we're seeing a lot of partners and RFPs and RFIs requesting to understand our InfoSec and our IT policy and what are the things we're doing to safeguard that data, because the end user is getting more attuned to that now. But if I had to pinpoint why, it's probably because it hasn't been taken seriously up until this point.
Neil, wise words, Neil. Really good thoughts.
Well, and I'll take
Wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, I'll even add to what Neil says is, and because he's coming through a third-party monitoring station, he sees a diverse cross-section of dealers. I know that, you know, if you look at the dealers that are on this call, they're all middle to larger size dealers. So some of that means that they're going to have some resources to address some of these things. But as you start to talk to, and I don't want to throw a blanket over the entire section, but as the dealer base goes smaller in size, you know, to that 1 and 2 man operation, one, I think they're intimidated, going back to where we started. I think they're intimidated by, they don't have the resources, they don't understand it. To them, it's too big a problem for them to get their hands around. And they probably rationalize away some of it because, well, I'm just a little player, so why would they come look for me? But I think John Smythe touched on it earlier. If they go in and install, a small camera system on their client's network, and they do some things wrong and they start opening up firewalls and other things like that, sure, maybe they're a small company that has very little risk, but they may have taken their client and just thrown them right out into the middle of the road, and it's just a matter of when does the car hit them as opposed to if. So I think the dealer base, as a cross section, you'll get a lot different response depending on their size and whether they feel it's even within their grasp. So
yeah, that's a really good point. I totally agree with that, and I do think too, one of those things you just said, even like making that corollary to like a physical, like a camera system, I can actually see the threat. I can see somebody coming up to the door, right? That peace of mind that comes with it of knowing I can see and monitor and I have visibility, going back to that lighthouse image. In cybersecurity, we struggle with that. And because we struggle with it, we struggle to see the threat, and we struggle to see, hey, am I a target, or how do I know I'm a target, or why should I invest and do something more? Really, really good thoughts. I agree with that. I'm cognizant of time here, so I'm going to kind of skip over this pandemic question, but a lot of times I do like to ask, hey, let's look at the actual COVID pandemic and how has that radically changed us, right? And for many of us, and I know the Affinity folks here can attest, for all the partners and clients that they support, everyone's now work from home. This is a significant new thing that we now have to worry about, right? And so certainly things we need to include. And so I want to jump into some solutions, right? Some thoughts for all of us, because I don't just want to portray and talk only about the problem. I think that's worthless if we don't talk about the solutions too and what we should be doing. And so keep in mind, Perch comes out of some really large banks. My CEO is Aaron Chernin, and Aaron worked for JP Morgan Chase and led their security automation division and had hundreds of analysts working for him, like literally 200 security analysts of different kinds. And, he would always joke about, like leave no budget uncovered. He was using millions of dollars in budgets that, most of us don't even earn in revenue every year. And when he went to a much smaller bank, he realized, whoa, so not everyone has these luxuries. And that was really the eye opener for him to start Perch, is realizing it's not that a large bank does everything right. They just have enormous resources. And the rest of us are resource constrained, right? We can't go hire 10 security people. Most of us can't go hire one security person, let alone one IT person. And so obviously, as we mentioned before, we have to distribute and outsource and share to partners that can do all of this. And these are the big things that we need. And while many of us are doing a lot of things, like we've got antivirus, we've got firewalls, we've got those good things in place that we should have in place, we're still missing the other things we need around security. And I want to draw some analogies for you that'll kind of make some sense, right? One of the things that we miss is visibility, right? And going into like the world of the cloud. I'm sure many of you guys are using Office 365. You've got a lot of cloud services that you haven't had in place before, been helpful in the world of the pandemic, right? We know that. But all of a sudden now we have a lot of questions we ask ourselves, like, where are my users logging in from? Since anyone can go to Office 365 and just log in, right, from anywhere, theoretically, how do I know that Bob and Sally logged in from Ohio and not Uzbekistan? Right? Those are concerns that we wonder and we worry about. And if Bob logs in from Uzbekistan, probably it's not Bob. So how do we do something about that? Or what happens if Sally shares a OneDrive link to somebody and it's an anonymous link and it's got private customer payment information in it? How do we know about that? Those are things that we're missing. And I could go on and on. You see examples of all of this. The last one I want to include, though, because I am seeing this, a big pickup of this at Perch, is what we call BEC, or business email compromise. And the ultimate outcome of this is wire and ACH fraud, as you guys know. And so I have seen a lot of our partners at Perch that have had clients that have struggled with this. And so the short of it is a bad guy gets access to email. They watch that email, they get forward copies of those emails, and they wait until that company needs to do some kind of invoice. And that's when they seize on their attack and they jump in and they say, hey, actually, as the bad guy, they pose as the good guy. And they say, hey, actually, that it needs to go here instead of where you're trying to send it for that wire, for that payment. And the company, unsuspecting, says, oh, okay. And they just switch the wire, the ACH instructions with their bank, and they don't know it until the next day. And they've sent out $100,000 or whatever the bill is to the wrong person. That's BEC stuff. And we're seeing more and more and more of that happening, right? So just compounding these risks. And again, all of this happens because we don't have visibility into there's a bad guy lurking. There's somebody that's doing something inside the network, right? So we know these things. Let me skip by some of this here. I want to get to some content that I really want to talk about. Here's what I want to talk about. And I love this group here. First of all, I love you guys because you're talkative. Thank you. But also I love it because your background. So you guys coming from a physical security world will very much understand this. And whether you use this internally for your own employees or you use this externally in any way that you choose, the problem that we have in security is an over-reliance in prevention. Prevention's good. It's good for us to stop the bad things, but as you guys know, in the world of physical security, eventually prevention fails, right? I can have all the fire prevention that I want in this world, and a fire can still happen. I can have all the physical locks, the best of breed that's out there on every door and window, and robberies still can happen, right? We know these things. Eventually, prevention fails. And so the question that we should be asking ourselves is not, am I doing enough prevention? The question we should ask ourselves is, what am I doing after prevention fails? Let me draw an analogy for you. In the world of security, we call this a difference between detection and prevention. And so prevention is stopping threats that I know are bad, that I know I can stop. That's good. We should do that. Every day we should do that. Every day we do that. But what do we do with the threats that make it past those things that we didn't recognize as a threat? Whether it's a user, like I mentioned, that logged in from Uzbekistan, maybe it's a user that opened a phishing email. Maybe it's some kind of malware that got installed from somebody driving by to one of those grayware websites, not recognizing. It said, your browser's out of date. And they're like, oh no, and they try to click and update it. Whatever the threat is, what do we do when our prevention misses that? And so here's a really good analogy. And I bet you didn't think I was going here with this, but I use this almost every single day, is I use a physical analogy. So in our homes, we have a lot of good stuff going on. We put in an alarm system. We put in prevention of all kinds. We put all these things in place, rightly so. But what we're missing, if we go with prevention only, like door locks and windows, is what do we do when a bad guy intruder gets in the home, right? So if we make a cybersecurity analogy to this, to come back to this, you know, for us, those preventions, in the world of cyber, like the door lock, so to speak, that's our firewall, our antivirus, our spam controls, what I call the table stakes, the things that are really important that you need to have in place. But in the world of cybersecurity, we usually stop there. So imagine a home system, like a home alarm, just like locks and no alarm system. That's not good for peace of mind. That's not good for security. And so same thing in the world of cybersecurity is this is what security monitoring is all about. Right? Looking, watching, taking action, the exact same analogy. And I know for you guys, you get it. You're like, okay, that makes total sense to me. I can't tell you how many times I use this analogy all the time. And people are like, okay, I understand now. This makes total sense. This is a big piece of what we're missing in the world of cybersecurity today is that management and that monitoring 24/7 to find things when they happen early and do something about it. And let me give you one example of this. I don't know if any of you guys ever read the Verizon data breach report, but every year they produce a really, really good report. It's free. You can download it for free. It's by their security team who's the best in the business. And one of the things they do is they track attacks after they happen, and they look at the data. I want to show you this. Notice down here on the X, you see the time, right? You know, seconds, minutes, so on and so forth. And then they split attacks into the compromise phase where the bad guys are getting access, the exfiltration stage where bad guys are sending the data out, like stealing it or running the ransomware, and then the time for the good guys to discover and stop that threat. And you can probably already see what's going on here. Look at most attacks, the compromise happens within hours. That's how long it takes, very quick. Yet, on average, the time where detection, the discovery actually starts, not only has the bad guy already finished, in most cases, the compromise, they've already finished the exfiltration ransomware before we even recognize it. So this is what we call a cyber detection gap. We're missing that stage in which bad guys are in the network and doing something, and we're not responding to it. Let me kind of stop there for a minute. So all that makes sense so far? Any light bulb moments, or does that click, or any questions about any of this so far?
And the delay is because it takes us time to understand that something had occurred? Is that where that lag comes from?
It's a couple things. It's definitely that. And then it's also this a lack of ability of understanding there was a bad guy present and in the network. That's usually number one. Just like that lighthouse analogy, right? Big wave about to hit, but because I can't see everything, I'm not aware of everything, unaware. Okay, so here's how I like to distill all of this. It's not that the problem that we have is not a lack of data, not a lot of, it's not that we're lacking the things that we need, the data points we need to protect ourselves. It's that we lack the ability to respond quickly. In other words, our machines are constantly telling us where people are logging into, who's accessing what new things have spun up and are now running on the machine, curious and odd behaviors that are happening. The challenge is, and somebody said this early on at the beginning, hey, look, I am busy with my firewalls, my user protection, my user education, updating machines. Like, that's what I'm doing 24/7 in my job role. I don't have time to look at all of the rest, and I hear you. Right? That's very difficult for most of us, right? And this is the problem that we have, is because we're not looking at all those data points and we don't have the time and the resources to do so. That's where that's where that shift of detecting an attack happens way too late in the game. That's really where that gap is, right? And so this is a big piece of what, like, if you talk to Affinity, what they're all about, you know, when they're saying, hey, look, when Affinity provides managed cybersecurity, if you've never heard this term SIEM before, security, information, and event management, this is the idea here of getting all of this data into one place, whether it's logins, whether it's what's being installed, whether it's traffic that's being seen on the network and correlating against it, whatever it is, bringing all of that into one place where we're looking at it 24/7. Again, just like a home alarm system, and you got things coming off all the time. Hey, this window sensor open, but it was, 2 p.m. in the day. The camera system looks like it was an employee window washer. It looks like we're safe here, okay, versus one at 2 a.m. and it definitely looks like a bad guy crawling in through the window, right? Just examples. Same thing in the world of security, looking at all these data points that are happening all the time, including cloud in our processes. These are the things that typically we are missing. And I think that's about all I really had for you guys today. And so I wanted to leave some time for, well, look at this. We got 10 minutes, right? So I wanted to kind of illustrate for us where this problem exists, why it exists, and to go back and kind of reiterate, we have a visibility problem. We have a detection problem. We have a gap in the time to detection. And it's not that we don't want to do those things. It's how do we do all these things? How do we bring all this data in one place to look and see and respond quickly and put the eyes on the glass we're watching it? So give me some feedback. What resonates with you guys? If you guys could pinpoint a cybersecurity solution, and I don't mean a technical solution or a vendor, but just what you need in place to protect your organization.
Wes,
if you could wave that magic wand, what would it be? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, quick question. So, all right, so it gets past all your existing protection, and you, in a system like yourself or some other solution, detects it. Is that early detection? What are the next steps? And does it statistically significantly give you a better chance of actually stopping it, or is it just kind of it's passed and then you're kind of screwed?
Yeah, I love the question. So this is where we as defenders, as good guys, have a lot of advantage. So you'll probably hear, John, people say all the time, it's so hard because in the world of security, we have to be right every single time, and a bad guy only has to be right once to get into a network. That's true. However, the instant a bad guy has access into a network, whether it's a tiny little foothold or it's a colossally large foothold where he's got access to tons of stuff, the second they have access, that entire paradigm flips. And here's what I mean by that. Bad guys don't know your network. They don't know who you are. They have to discover, they have to find out where those systems are, what the backup systems are, how to turn antivirus off, how to get ransomware running. I mean, they're good at it, but it takes them time. And so here's my point out of all of that is once a bad guy's in our network, we have time, whether that's minutes, hours, in some cases, if we're lucky, days, to detect and stop that attack. And there's a lot of things that we can do. And I'll give you some examples. I'm aware of one company that got a significant ransomware breach because a user installed a browser toolbar on Chrome that intercepted traffic. It was one of those, like I mentioned before, hey, your browser's out of date. You got to click this to update it. And they're trying to be a good employee, and they installed that toolbar. And that toolbar would intercept traffic with malicious traffic. It wasn't a huge issue initially, but because nobody knew about it, it was getting worse. It was getting worse, and it would intercept things. And she installed something else eventually through that toolbar that let a bad guy into the network, and everything happened from there. My point is, to stop that, all they would have had to do is say, hey, that browser toolbar got installed. That's no good. Let's get rid of that right now. They've been fine. Another example is like a phishing attack, right? A user clicks on a phishing attack. It opens up a Word document that looks like an invoice, and that invoice has macros enabled, and they enable it because they think they have to pay this invoice, right? You guys know how phishing attacks work, and it connects outbound to the bad guy. Now the bad guy's got access to that single machine, but they've got to use that to get access to everything else in the network. Well, you have some time there that you can detect, hey, there's a bad guy on that machine right there. We can cut the internet off that machine. We can take that machine offline, and we can completely re-image it and reinstall everything and educate the user before the bad guy gets access to anything else, right? Those are just simple examples of if we can be early on detection, then we can be quick on response. And if we're quick on response, it's sort of like cutting the head of the snake off, right? Right away before something happens that gets worse. And that's really the problem that we lack in security today. We know how bad guys operate. We know everything about how they work and operate. It's just not being quick enough to respond to them, John. It's a really good question.
Wes, this is Tom. I've understood a lot of what you said, but what I appear to be missing is this, especially when you think about how many of our dealers are small dealers. What is it that we need to budget or look at to understand just some form of detection and people helping us? Because we've got no idea, at least from what I've heard so far, about money that's involved. And also,
yeah, I got you.
Also, on the last question, I understand that early detection is key to this, but I didn't quite hear how it happens. I heard if it happens, what can be done, but how does early detection happen? Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, great questions. So I'm going to tackle the second question first, and then I'm going to invite Rick to chat a little bit from Affinity side of the view on the first part of that question. So second part of that question was really good. And the way that those things happen, we cannot detect what we cannot see. And so what it's really about is looking at things like what's happening at the data of that machine, the log data. What is the log data reporting? Because think of the log data as an actual, just a written file of everything happening on that machine. Every single action, everything that happens, good or bad, it's writing notes on it, right? That's good to have, but it's only effective when people are looking at that data saying, whoa, that doesn't look right. Let me dive in and investigate this. Oh, you know what? That was okay. It's weird, but it's okay. Or that doesn't look right. That is definitely malicious. That is definitely a sign of no, some bad things happening, right? The bad guy, looks like a phishing attack, whatever it may be. We need to take action on this right away. The way that those things happen is by looking at the things that are happening, the log data on those machines, the network traffic of what we see connecting in and out. Is it going to somewhere strange? Is it doing something odd? Is it spiking network traffic at 2 a.m. when it should never do that? Those behavioral anomalies, those things that are happening that are out of band. The only way that we see those kinds of attacks, the only way we detect those attacks like I've been talking about is looking at that log data, looking at that network data. That's how all those things are accomplished, right? And that's what Perch does. There are other companies, it's not just Perch, right? There's a lot of other companies that do that too. But that is what we do 24/7, looking at those things, watching those things, monitoring those things for early signs of attack and taking action right away. Now, first part of your question is also really good. And I'll tell you, from a solutions perspective, how we go about addressing all of this, Perch cannot address this on our own. This is why we have partners, because it's more than just Perch. It's, for us, our partners, which we call our boots on the ground, that wrap around all these other things. And that is exactly what Affinity does, right? So Affinity is really, really good at saying, hey, we understand all of the things it takes to build a mature cybersecurity program. It's Perch. And you saw all of the things that were early on that slide. In fact, let me just go back to that really quick, because Affinity has some really good stuff on there. Here we go. So all of the other things that Affinity provides on top, not just Perch, is what goes into making an effective solution. Rick, I want to invite you back if you're still here and off mute. I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. This goes back to my initial comment that the increasing of your posture against or insecurity, because there's more than one way. We're used to, hey, I've got an antivirus client on my computer, I'm good to go. That's the way it used to be. I can remember the days, Wes, you might be able to, where it was hard to talk a client into even installing an antivirus program on their computer. Today, the hackers are much more elaborate in the way that they're getting into your networks. So training your customers, or your training of your employees, watching the logs, log monitoring, monitoring a dark web, for example. Have passwords of mine been compromised in any way? Are all ways to look, oh, there we go. My computer, I'm sorry, one moment. My computer shut off for a sec. There we go. Ways to increase that posture. So I think the first step would be to start with looking at what do you have in place now, and where do we need to improve, and making a list. And you could use a managed service provider potentially for that, or if you've got your own in-house IT, to sit down and discuss those items and start checking off boxes in order to help increase that posture and bring some of these tool sets in to protect yourself. As Wes has said, the responding to it, knowing that somebody from that there's a foreign country that I'm connected to right now, is something. If I ask you right now, any of you, do you know that somebody from Russia isn't connected to or China or anywhere connected to your system? Yes or no? Okay, and if you answer I don't know, well then that's part of the problem. So we need to through these tool sets, through your IT staff, your service providers, you should be discussing these topics to get, because there's not, I can't just throw out a number. This is how much it's going to cost. Okay, there's how many sites do you have? How many locations? How many users? What's the complexity of your network? There's a lot that goes involved into figuring out ultimately what your costs are going to be. But you can be rest assured that if something happens, that the expense to you is going to be far greater. So,
Rick, I understand what you just said completely. And if I'm ADT, I would think that would be a very complex situation. But again, most of our dealers are smaller, and they need to have at least some kind of a starting number. For instance, if you said, the most minimal thing I could recommend is $150,000 a year, then that's going to wipe a lot of them out of the question immediately. I'm looking for some place that they would think that at least they had a chance to look into this, as opposed to being overwhelmed by the numbers. Is there a minimum number, still understanding that with that minimum number, you'd still have to look at everything you just said? Is there a minimum number to look at?
Minimum. So like a handful of people, for example. So basically how many people are in your business?
Hey, Rick, real quick, you mind if I chime in?
Yeah, go ahead.
We just went through this exercise. So you can scale it back down to the smallest company. There's an MSP. If you're looking at outsourcing this, and a small company really should, there's MSPs that are going to probably fit any size business, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. You know, it's a per user fee. It's, you know, depending on how much, you know, it's worth looking into. I mean, I agree with Rick. It's just hard to put a number on it. But it's not substantial, Tom. I think it's just worth calling around and looking into if, you know, no matter what size business you are, even if you're a one-man firm, I'm sure there's an MSP that'll be happy to provide services for you. Is that not to cut you off, we interviewed a lot of companies just recently and went through this exercise. So, but I did have I mean, Tom, is that a fair answer? I mean,
well, again, just to try to get our guys some type of thought process of where they might begin. Again, John, I totally understand with your company. You've got a good sized company, and calling around, getting all those things in, I get. I still don't have a handle on what it would be like or what that early detection would be, because it's a great idea. I mean, Wes made a beautiful case for why this is important, it should be done. It's just that sometimes.
Well, the cool thing about the business, because I've looked into this, because actually security companies like ourselves are getting into the MSP business, I mean, we have friends who are getting into this. It's very scalable. So, I mean, you know, it's the same as the Perch network monitoring, and not to plug it, but I mean, we've got more IP addresses. It's a per IP charge. You're a smaller business. So, you know, it's substantially less for a smaller business because there's less going on. And it's just, yeah, I mean, my advice would be to call around, but Wes, I had a question, because Tom did mention this, is, okay, you get that hack at 3 a.m. I mean, you know, and and are you guys then reporting it immediately? I guess I don't even understand how this works. You or a company similar to yourself reporting it to whomever they're supposed to, and then that company is immediately responding to it? Because, I mean, if it's a matter of minutes or hours, I mean, you can be in quite the predicament quickly.
Yeah, exactly right. So keep in mind the Verizon data that I showed you, those minutes, that's, if you look at the N that's in there, like the study data, who they surveyed and who they talked to, that's like super large orgs that are literally facing North Korea and Syria, right? China, those kinds of groups, right? The ones that actually, like the GAN crab actors, those sorts of things, like the ransomware as a service actors, those guys take a little longer, right? They're still in the days and weeks, right? My point is, so it's scalable. Like I can answer from my point of view. My point of view is, this is why we love our partners like Affinity, because what will happen is when we see something, and we're operating within minutes, right? We're well before that detection curve that you saw. What we do is we report. We say, this is what we're seeing. This is the severity. This is what we need to take action on. In some cases with our partners, we will go both to the partner and directly to that user. Now that's for the larger companies, right? Those that actually have embedded IT folks. But our job is to say, this is what we're seeing. This is the significance. Do you need to jump on a phone call and talk about it? That sort of thing, whatever. But here's what you need to do about it. You need to immediately do these things. Or, you know, some threats, like I mentioned, like a browser toolbar, it's not a red alarm, you know, drop everything and get to it. It's, hey, sometime today you need to remote to that machine and get rid of that little thing, right? It needs to happen, but not right away. Or, you know, hey, we saw Bob log in from Florida. Maybe he's on vacation, maybe he's not. Perch doesn't know, but you guys know. So just a noting kind of thing. Hey, we're seeing this. Can you tell us what you know about it? We're seeing that. Tell us what you know about it. So our job is to give you that early warning, to operate within those minutes time frame, and tell you what the severity is from our point of view. We can tell you right away if something is, oh no, this is a bad deal, or this is just a notable event. You need to take action when you get a minute.
One more question, not to dominate anything, but is it behavioral to the point of the company, or across your entire spectrum of customers? Is it understand what our company does and detect it based on our activity, which is normal?
Yeah. It's both, right? So there's some things we universally know are good or bad, and then there's some things that we're just not sure of. And I'll give you an example. because I like examples. One of our customers, and I can share this, they've given me permission, is Emory University out in Atlanta. Universities are unique in that they have all these student networks everywhere, and those student networks are well known for having malware. And so my team knows if we see real actual malware and it's on their student network, Emory says, not our job, we can't handle it, it's not our machine, it's a student machine, leave it alone, don't even tell us. And so that's an example of something kind of custom that we'll see, and we have notes for each customer on how they want those things handled, because we do like to be pretty flexible on the behavioral side. So yes, some things we universally know for everybody, some things we just need some tuning and information directly from that user to know what should happen with it. Guys, I am out of time. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Thomas, I just wanted to say that we've got clients that say have 5 users, and they might be spending a couple $100 for this type of monitoring that Wes is talking about monthly. So it does scale down to really small companies. And so if you'd like to talk, no charges, give me a call, and I'd be happy to kind of get an idea of what your environment's like and give you maybe a more precise number.
Rick, thank you. I appreciate the answer, really. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Wes, you got to head out, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, appreciate it. That was great.
Hey, John, thank you, Rick, the rest of the team. You guys have been awesome. Love the communications, the Q&A. If I can help in any way, just reach out. Rick is my point person here, and appreciate everyone's time today.
Yep, very informative. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we'll see everybody.
Thank you, Wes. So, John, I just got a couple housekeeping things that you touched on a little bit, obviously, when we started the call. So I thought, unless you got something else, I can wrap up with a few things. So I'm going to try to share my screen here real quick so let's see here. See if I can get this right. So one of the things that you had mentioned earlier, and hopefully everyone is seeing the training course information that's coming up. John mentioned this as we started the call. We have our level 1 class coming up on October 7th. This is one of the classes that's kind of the benchmark for the industry. So if you've not put your people through this course, this is a great foundational course. It provides a lot of cross-sectional information for your team, both technical and sales. And since we're talking about cyber, we're running this virtually. So, you get to sit on another call like this and get trained. So this information's available. If anyone has any questions, give us a shout. And the last thing I was going to touch on real quick is John mentioned our annual meeting is coming up on October 29th. So watch your emails. There's a lot of information coming, and we'll be doing registrations online for that as well. So other than that, John or Alan, you got anything you want to throw into the mix at the end here?
Nope. Dale, thanks for hosting it. Thanks everybody for attending.
Alan's muted. Hold on, let me unmute you. Nope. You're still muted. There you go.
Okay. I just like to thank everybody for coming in. I hope everybody enjoyed this. I'll tell you, I really learned a lot on this call, and I wish more of our companies in Ohio had attended this. It's really, really valuable. So thanks so much for putting this together, John, and finding the speaker.
So once we get the link from Zoom on the recording, I'll send the link out to everyone that was on the call. So if you have other team members that weren't able to participate today because they were actually out working and not sitting on a Zoom call, I'll send you that link so that they can watch it remotely. And obviously there'll be contact information for our speakers as part of that. So if you have questions, you can contact us. You can contact John or Alan, or contact them directly.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything they want to throw in before we just say go back to work? I guess we're all going back to work.
Thanks, Dale.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, thanks.
Have a good one, everybody. See you. Bye.
See you.